Hello everyone and welcome to Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets, discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's dive in. We will begin our review of global economy with key releases in the US and Europe. The US economy expanded at an annual pace of 4.9% in the third quarter, faster than 2.1% in the second quarter, and at the fastest pace since the fourth quarter of 2021, just about 2 years ago. The economy managed to accelerate its expansion despite the Federal Reserve's effort to cool the economy by increasing its short-term benchmark rate to a 22-year high near 5.5%. The increase in consumer spending, exports, business investment in inventories, government spending at all levels, and residential fixed investments were partly offset by a decline in non-residential fixed investment. The European Central Bank left its three key lending rates unchanged as widely expected. The central bank paused rates 10 times in a row since 2022 and lifting the main refinancing rate to a 22-year high of 4.5% and the deposit facility rate to a record high of 4%. We now review global financial markets, including key events in bond market, currencies, energy trading, and stock. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury hovered near 5%, the 2007 level, and the alternative measure of inflation showed little progress on inflation. Gold rallied for the third week in a row and advanced more than 1% on escalating tensions in the Middle East as investors sought safe haven assets. Crude oil declined 4% amid prospects of a wider conflict in the Middle East and weakening demand in the U.S. Natural gas prices in Europe edged higher but stayed elevated on the worries of a supply crunch in the weeks ahead, and surged 8% in the U.S. on the worries of colder than expected weather and weaker inventories. The euro held stable in the week, but the currency faced headwinds after the U.S. Treasury yield advanced and the European Central Bank paused rates. The yen struggled and hovered near its 11-month low, and currency traders worried that the government was more likely to intervene in the weeks ahead. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite dropped more than 2%, and both indexes are now in correction territory. European markets extended losses for the second week on interest rate uncertainties and worries about slowing economic growth. The DAX index in Germany and French index, CAC 40 index in Paris, are teetering near the correction territory, and the FTSE 100 index is also in the correction territory. Market indices in Shanghai and Hong Kong were lone gainers in Asia after the government announced a 1 trillion yuan stimulus for reconstruction efforts in the areas affected by natural disasters. About 650 companies released earnings this week, and big tech companies dominated headlines. We now review companies with positive quarterly results. Microsoft said quarterly net income soared 27% and cloud segment revenue jumped 19%, and the company returned $9 billion to shareholders through stock purchases and dividends in the quarter. Amazon.com reported strong quarterly results after net income tripled from a year ago and operating margin improved on rising sales. Intel reported eighth quarterly revenue declines in a row, but the company's guidance supported the advance in the stock. Chipotle Mexican Grill reported comparable store sales rose by 5% and net income rose, supported by a price increase and more traffic. Royal Caribbean Cruises advanced after the company reported improving quarterly results and added bookings in the third quarter were significantly exceeding the levels in 2019. Meta Platforms, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, said earnings nearly tripled, but guided softening advertising revenue in the current quarter. Daily active users across all brands, including Facebook and Instagram, increased 7% to 3.1 billion, and monthly active users jumped 7% to 4 billion. United Rentals advanced after reporting rising quarterly sales and earnings and initiating its first ever quarterly dividend. Coca-Cola said price increases supported revenue growth, but unit case volumes also advanced. General Electric said quarterly revenue increased on the back of growth in aerospace division and demand for renewable power equipment. Let's shift our attention to companies that lagged investors' expectations. Google parent Alphabet reported a sharp jump in quarterly revenue and earnings, but the growth in cloud segment fell short of expectations set by some investors. Southwest Airlines, the regional airline, reported lower than expected revenue of $6.5 billion, and the company said it plans to trim its capacity growth after demand growth returns to pre-pandemic levels. The company also reiterated its capital spending plan ahead of the coming winter season to avoid experiencing another technology meltdown leading to the complete halting of all flights last winter. Hasbro plunged after the toy maker reported a decline in third quarter sales, largely driven by weakness in its consumer and entertainment segments. Moreover, the company's guidance also forecasted sales weakness in the current quarter. Bristol Myers Squibb dropped after the pharmaceutical company reported quarterly earnings that fell short of expectations. The company said its blood cancer drug Revlimid is facing tough competition from generic drug makers. United Parcel Service declined after the parcel delivery company reported a decline in revenue because the company faced a series of disruptions in a strike. CoStar Group reported higher quarterly earnings and revenues and forecast muted sales growth in the current quarter, acknowledging ongoing commercial real estate market weakness. Boeing Company reported shrinking quarterly losses and forecasted fewer than anticipated 737 MAX planes this year. Next week, investors are awaiting Fed's rate decision, and about 1,000 companies are scheduled to release earnings in the U.S. Companies including Apple, Airbnb, AMD, Amgen, Caterpillar, Eli Lilly, Etsy, McDonald's, PayPal, Pfizer, and Starbucks are scheduled to release their results next week. You can read the U.S. and global financial market news, earnings calendar updates, stock movers, and economic releases data on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can also get latest financial books on radara.com and keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com. That's all for this week, and we will see you again next week.